Welcome to another Creative Podcast, where creative outcasts come together to share their stories so we can all feel a little less lonely. I'm your host, Janelle Marquez. Hello. Welcome back to another episode, everybody. I am so happy you're here. If you are watching this on YouTube, I'm going to let you know right now, yes, you're not crazy. This setup has changed. It has slightly changed, not entirely. But we have a new lighting situation, which is still not what I would like, but it's pretty close to what I want. Actually, if I'm being honest, it's not what I want. I want natural lighting. I love filming in natural lighting. In fact, I learned that the morning light that comes through the window in my office actually is so beautiful and it's perfect. And the lighting stays consistent in here from about 8 until 3 p.m., which is really great. However, the day that I am filming this episode, it's actually thunderstorming. Storming. We're having flash flood warnings, and this is like great news if you live in Arizona, but it's not if you're a content creator who relies on natural lighting to film their content, and especially when you have 18 podcast episodes that have already been filmed in natural lighting. It's just a little bit harder to remain consistent when you don't have it. So I think it's kind of funny that I'm having to pivot and make these changes based off the day, because today's episode is all about evolving as a creative. And I'm going to take this weather situation as my sign to start evolving my podcast setup. I'll be incredibly honest, I am not the biggest fan of studio lighting. For one, I don't have the most professional studio lighting. I have what works, but in a perfect world, I think I would choose different lighting. But I have built this entire podcast around being able to use what you have to create what you wish existed in the world. And this episode, once again, didn't almost happen for multiple reasons. I could say that about so many episodes. But this episode in particular was me being stubborn about being consistent about what I've created so far. And I'm still a little mad because this is episode 19. After this, it's my last episode of the season. And these next 2 episodes are probably going to look unlike all my other videos, which I'm personally not the biggest fan of, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. And I think at this point, I'm just trying to have this up and done and just put it out there no matter what it takes to do. So I'm trying to look past the perfectionist tendencies that still lie within me and just get this damn episode filmed and uploaded for you guys. So that is what we're doing. My apologies for the incredibly long ramble at the beginning of this episode, but it is happening and we are staying in theme with evolving as a creative. So I'm still going to work on lighting. I know that I could fix quite a bit of the things I probably don't like in post. So I probably will be much more content with what I end up putting out there. But be patient with me as I will have a couple changes going into season 2. And one of those changes being, yes, a new background setup, sort of. It won't change too much. It will just change enough. But with that being said, let's just start diving right into today's episode, because my rambling is a pretty realistic bit of the evolution I've been experiencing as a creative. And I think we don't really often hear about what it's like to evolve as a creative, no matter what industry you're in. When we live in a world that we're constantly worried about the future and what's next and what's new and what's hot, we often forget that we're going through our own journeys, and sometimes we forget to take a moment and just stop and smell the roses. But those of us who do, sometimes you'll look back and you'll be like, dang, I did change. Or maybe you might look back and be like, I haven't changed that much. And that kind of goes to show that evolving as a creative is going to look differently for every single person. The only thing that we're all going to have in common is that we will evolve. Whether you're evolving in your craft, whether you're evolving in your passions as a person, change is inevitable and it will happen. And we're going to talk all about it today. Let's get this one thing straight. And that is, whether you're ready or not, change is going to happen. Now, there are plenty of us out there who actually are afraid to make change happen. And I think that's totally okay. Change is incredibly scary. I was recently telling my therapist that change has always been something that has frightened me, but I've never been afraid to go after what I want. However, sometimes you can get really comfortable in something, and when you're in those situations, the fear of changing or the fear of the unknown even, that can be almost more frightening than being comfortable with where you're at. And when you're in a situation like that, it kind of makes it hard to evolve. When you don't allow yourself to evolve, it can start to do more harm than good. And you're probably asking yourself, Nell, how? Like, aren't we always aiming to look towards something or become something? Yes, but sometimes evolving doesn't mean you have to change everything. You can be satisfied and content with where you're at, but that may just be in one area of your life. There may be other areas in your life where you are looking to evolve. Just from my own personal experience, I have found that when you don't allow yourself to evolve, you can start to lose a sense of who you are. You lose the sense of self that you have. And next thing you know, you're wondering why you feel you're kind of stuck in the stage of life that you're at. And a couple of months ago, that's exactly where I was at. I felt like I hit an emotional wall. Say wall, maybe it was a breaking point. Regardless, I just remember feeling like I needed to have a heart-to-heart with myself and ask myself, like, is this where I truly want to be? And feeling stuck is not a fun feeling. I will say I felt very sad. I felt very lost. It's like you're roaming the world without a compass. And that could be really hard for people who are goal-oriented and people who tend to constantly work and achieve towards goals. I'm one of those people who, like, if I have a goal, I'm going to reach and get it. And I have this mindset of, like, I want to be the best I can be at whatever it is that I choose to do, which is not always healthy. And going back to the point that I made earlier, I do think that staying complacent for a while and just being in a place where you're like, I'm pretty good with where I'm at, I also think that could actually be pretty bad for your mental health, because if you're not really chasing towards something and you're okay with kind of the way things are, but you're not happy with them, or you're wishing you were elsewhere, but you're choosing to just kind of stay with your app because it's comfortable, I think in the long run, that just leads to a lot of self-sabotaging. And for me, it led to a lot of limiting beliefs. And it constantly made me start thinking that whenever something went wrong or something wasn't right, I kept thinking like, oh, I must be the problem because this whole thing is so great. It must be a me thing. But if you're scared to know whether the grass is greener on the other side and you feel like you're best being complacent, I want to be the first person to let you know that some risks are worth taking. It's better to know than to always wonder what if. So that's just my 2 cents. But I think another thing when it comes to like evolving as a creative, it's like, how do you even know when it's time for you to evolve? Because I kind of mentioned how I one day just kind of hit a wall or a breaking point, whatever you want to take it as. And like, I didn't immediately think like, oh, I need to start making some changes in my life. I kind of went through the whole cycle of blaming myself for why I felt like I was stuck. And when I say like blaming myself, I had a lot of thoughts that weren't the most positive towards myself. So I kept thinking I was the problem. I kept thinking I wasn't enough. I kept saying I wasn't hardworking enough. A lot of things that I don't truly believe. I think the signs were there for quite some time. I just think that I was such a busy bee and I was just going and going that I wasn't really ever taking a second to just kind of stop and evaluate where I was at my life and what was working for me, what wasn't working for me. I think that's just like another thing that really ended up harming me in the long run. I never really had like a mental check-in with myself that was like incredibly honest, because part of me almost felt like if I said my real thoughts out loud, everything I had would just be gone in a blink of an eye. And I was just so afraid because I became so comfortable with the life I was living and running on this wheel of chaos. I was thriving in chaos. I kept following a trajectory that was gonna mean that I had to continue living a life like that, and I just couldn't. I'm only one person and I know what I'm capable of doing, but my mental well-being and whether I'm living my life or not, like that really started to matter to me. I started to crave living my actual life versus creating an image of this life that looks glamorous and fulfilled and make sure I had X number in my bank account to prove that I made it to everyone. But yeah, all those things just stopped being a priority for me. And in a way, it was quite freeing because when I did have that honest check-in with myself, all those things became very clear to me. And when I look back at it, I think it was very clear that there was just a bunch of signs I missed. So if you're creative and you're wondering, how do I know whether it's time for me to evolve and move on or not? Like, Nell, how do I know? Well, to sum up what I just said, here's some things I would look out for if I were you. First off, if you are feeling stuck, uninspired, or simply just not fulfilled with the work that you're doing, it's probably time for you to evolve. This is probably a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, but sometimes we think that we're going through these like droughts in our creative journeys where you're just not going to feel inspired or motivated. And that's true. That's totally valid. However, if you're experiencing those droughts of boredom, unfulfillment, all these things very often, it's probably time for you to switch things up. And that means it's time to evolve and grow. Sometimes it could feel very scary to be like, okay, that sounds like great, we found the problem, but like, how does one do it? We will get there. But if that's not you and you're like, I'm not stuck, I'm not inspired, I actually feel quite fulfilled, that's great. However, there's still room for you to evolve as a creative in other ways. So that's like the positive spin on that. Anywho, another common thought though that I continue to have throughout the time leading up to my big breaking point, I kept having a lot of thoughts that just kept starting with what if. So what if I worked as X, Y, and Z? What if I did X, Y, and Z? What if my life X, Y, like whatever it is. I just had a lot of thoughts that started with what ifs. And I kept dreaming about a life that wasn't the one that I was living in. And I felt like that should have been like the biggest red flag, if I'm being quite honest, because it's quite sad that I can't be in the present moment because of constantly being worried or constantly wondering what could have been. And then after my breaking point, I decided to just figure out and see, like, let's go see what's on the other side. Let's go try out some of these what ifs. And I have no regrets for ever doing any of that. I kind of did touch on this a little bit when it came to like my first point, or even in just like the beginning of this episode. But if you are a creative whose priorities have changed, your interests have changed, or even your motivations have changed, then it's probably time for you to evolve as well. I knew that this was kind of the big nail in the coffin for me when it came to realizing like, yeah, you gotta make a change, girl, because where you're at right now, you can't remain here. And I will say, even though I don't truly feel like I have continued to evolve into the creative I want to be, I can at least say that I like who I'm becoming. I did not like the person I was even like 3 weeks ago. But even then, at the beginning of this podcast, that girl, I know her, but she feels very far from the person who is sitting here talking to you guys on this mic. And I think it's kind of cool that I have this whole audio and video. If you're watching this on YouTube, I have all this like documentation to kind of show the evolution that I've experienced in what probably feels like the most life-changing year I've truly had. And like, not to freak anyone out, but this is the most alive and human I have felt in a very long time. And it's quite nice. If you guys have kept up with the podcast and you've been listening up until this point, you guys have know that I've been doing a lot of things. I've been trying a lot of new hobbies. I have just been doing a lot of things that are fulfilling my soul. Obviously, one of them being this podcast, but also one of them being tattooing. I received training back in August and I got my tattoo certification. And I have been taking the journey a lot slower than I anticipated, but also I am enjoying going at this speed that feels right for myself, because I want to make sure that I'm giving my hobbies and passions the time they deserve, but also I'm trying to really practice being on my own timelines and not the timelines that are expected of me. I feel like that's kind of hard to do sometimes, but if you were a people pleaser, you would know it can be tough. But trying a new hobby, experimenting, even simply just playing around, all of that is really good for you to do if you're looking to make steps towards making a change. Evolving as a creative is going to take time. It's going to be frustrating. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be worth it, because you have to remember that when it comes to this evolution in your creative journey, the whole point is for you to be present and in the moment and enjoy it. Because if you're not enjoying the journey, once you get to the end or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, if you did not enjoy getting there, can you really say it was worth it? And you know what? There are some careers, I will say, where that is the case. But I think as a creative, a lot of us are passionate about the work we do and we want to like what we do as we do it and as we're going through it. So if you're feeling unfulfilled, unhappy even, I recommend getting out of your comfort zone and just doing something new. Switch it up. And I kind of touched on this point a little bit earlier, but I also want to remind you that one of the steps, or even just like one of the beliefs you're going to have to like adapt when it comes to taking steps towards making a change, is just accepting that you're going to be bad at things. I'll be honest, that's also one of the reasons why I'm taking my tattoo journey as slowly as possible, or not even as slowly as possible, but just like at the rate that I feel most comfortable doing it at. And that's because I'm allowing myself to be okay with not being the best. I will continue to learn and grow the more that I do. So I don't beat myself up when I don't pull the straightest line, when I make a mistake. It really sucks because the hobby that I'm choosing is a permanent one and it's on people's skin and I think about it often, but I also remind myself all the time that I am just beginning and I will continue to learn with every single piece of work that I continue to create. And if that does not really stick with you, another way to look at this is to view being bad at something as it meaning that there is room for you to grow. That's the perspective that I really embraced when it came to trying something new, was that I don't need to be perfect at this, because the less perfect I am at this as I start, the more room there is for me to grow as an artist. And I can even say the same thing for my podcast. I feel like I've kind of started off pretty strong with my podcast, but I'm a lot more confident now when it comes to filming, shooting, writing my scripts, ad-libbing even, and I'm quite a yapper. So I feel like going off the riff, is that a phrase? Freestyling is kind of my thing. When it comes to evolving as a creative, I want you guys to understand that you don't have to change everything. Sometimes even shifting your approach or the way you work or any tiny little thing can make a major difference in whatever trajectory you're going on. And I feel like that's kind of underrated, if I'm being honest. I think sometimes, especially when it comes to like content creation, a lot of us think like, oh, I need a whole rebrand, or I know I need to do this. No, you don't. Sometimes you just need a little tweak. You just need a little adjustment. And those little changes could lead to big growth. But once again, like, that's just on a smaller scale. Sometimes we are in need of a full rebrand, but the amount of change that you feel like you need in your life is going to be quite subjective. And you just have to see like, what is it that you think you need? Because sometimes you could have like a short period of evolution, and next thing you know, you blink and 3 months later you're a whole new person. Sometimes you're not going to see growth until like 9 months to a year, but all of our journeys are so different. So just focus on your needs, your life, whatever it is, and do what you have to do. And with that being said, my last little tidbit to any creative out there who is looking to evolve is to just be patient with yourself. It's very frustrating. I know for a fact that I probably have been very frustrated and impatient and upset these last 2 months because I felt like I took steps, very big steps, towards making a change for myself in my life. And I'm not immediately seeing the results that I want or the outcome that I want. And I just have to remind myself that being 1% better every day is what leads to growth. Sometimes you're gonna have days where you grow like 20%. Sometimes you're gonna have days where you barely reach that 1% towards making a change. But any little thing that you can do to work towards your goals will eventually show and pay off in the long run. You just have to be so patient with yourself and be so kind, because the most important thing when it comes to evolving as a creative is that you're trying. It's that you're putting yourself out there and you're taking a risk and you're taking a chance on yourself to do what you believe is best for you. So don't be afraid of embracing the unknown, because sometimes the change you need is on that other side of all the things that you may fear. And remember, no two creatives are alike. All of our journeys are going to look so different, and that includes how we evolve. Some creatives evolve within their own industries. So a photographer might start picking up videography, or they might start picking up content creation, or they might pick up assistant directing, or they might simply make a change as much as the type of photography they do. So if I'm a sports photographer, let's say I fell in love over the holidays doing portraits for my family, and I want to evolve into doing that, or I want to add that to my portfolio and just kind of expand the things that I can offer. But then you might have someone like me, for example. I went from photography to social media marketing to then podcasting. All these things are kind of in the same realm of media, but then I decided to give tattooing a try. And that's actually something I have really enjoyed doing. And all of this goes to say that evolving is going to look like whatever you really need it to be for you. As someone who has been a creative for most of her life, I truly feel like this just isn't a conversation that is had as often as I wish it was, because I think sometimes we can see creators evolve throughout their careers, and usually it's kind of like, whoa, when did this happen, or where did this come from? But I will say, in this day and age, even though it's not something that's talked about, I will say it is more accepted to be a multifaceted or multi-hyphenated creative. I don't know if those are the right terms, but being like multifaceted, I hope that's the word. I'm going to use that. Anyway, having multiple passions as a creative, I think that is generally more accepted now, even though it's not really talked about. And shout out to all the creatives who embrace this, because I think it's really friggin' cool to see other creatives put themselves out there in other industries. And I think it should be more common and more accepted, because creatives are just like regular humans, and humans like a lot of different things. So I don't think we should hold ourselves these expectations that just because you're good at something, it means you should be doing that one thing and that one thing only. I know for a fact I'm in a season of change, and because I'm really good at the things I'm really good at, I feel like it's been a lot harder for people around me to accept that I'm looking to make a change in my life. But I've also found that the people closest to me understand that I have multiple passions and a lot of interests in other things. So I'm very fortunate that I've had a very accepting community around me. But it's not really always like that for most creatives. In fact, a lot of creatives get a lot of pushback because they are putting themselves out there in other places and other mediums, and it's just not fair. So I feel like I kind of rambled. These studio lights are incredibly hot. I'm also wearing very thick clothing, so that's kind of on me. But thank you guys for listening to episode 19 of Another Creative Podcast. Oh my gosh, you guys, next week is the 20th episode. And I'm really excited to talk about this one. I think, when am I not excited to talk to you guys? I don't know. I love what I do, and I'm really happy that y'all are here. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.